Stanley, thank you very much for being here. I heard you flew in from France just to be here at this event. Tell us more about what you were doing in France.
Yeah, thanks to Straits Times having me here. I spent like 8 months traveling around the world in mostly USA and Europe doing the book touring. So I'm so happy to be back in Asia because, in Europe, people are worried about the winter, while here the AC is still pretty strong, right? So getting cold. So yeah, I think visiting everywhere, you can feel this kind of tension around the geopolitics and everything. It's a little bit wild. It's a little bit like a stranger than fiction, but I think still there's something very optimistic out there.
Okay, for those of us here who are not too familiar with your work, would you mind summing up some brief points about your work, AI 2041, as well as The Waste Tide?
Sure. My debut, I was in France and Paris and Nantes for the launch of my two books in French. Waste Tide is a near future ecological thriller talking about the near future China's electronic waste problem, but also the problem in Southeast Asia and India and Africa for sure. And the very recent book, AI 2041, 10 Visions for Our Future, is an unusual collaboration between me and Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, the AI scientist and also investor of Sinoventure. So we have overlapping time back in the day. We both worked for Google. And I think this book, we like blending the genre with science fiction, with nonfiction. We use 10 stories set in 10 different cities all around the world to explain, to imagine the future with technology such as AI and what kind of like fundamental change bring to individual and also the society and also the ethical risk behind the scene. And Dr. Kai-Fu Lee wrote this kind of short essay along with each story to explain what's going on in the industry and what might become over the next 2 decades.
Okay, do you believe a future with more technology can transform the world and make it maybe a better and happier place?
I think definitely what we have in hand right now, we have technology such as AI to help us to develop like the new battery technology to actualize carbon neutrality, to fight against the climate change, to accelerating the vaccine development and also curing the cancer. But I think technology couldn't cure all the problems we're having right now. For example, it couldn't cure stupidity and ignorance and arrogance for sure. So I think this is something in our political system and in our mindset, which we need to transcend ourselves with the new ways of narratives. So I think this is what science fiction writers maybe could do a little bit of help.
Okay, science fiction fans out there, if you have any burning questions to ask Stanley, now's the time. Has AI delivered on its promise to humanity? We've got a question here. I think this is this a poll question? Or has AI delivered on its promise to humanity? What do you think?
I think, in my perspective, I think AI just like a mirror. It helps us to see more clearly who we are. Like humanity, a lot of AI, we fed it with data sets, collecting from the society, and it reveals this kind of invisible structure within our language. For example, the gender issue, the racism issue, all the bias and discrimination within our structure, social construction. So I think this is something AI definitely help us to reflexively think about what could we do to reshape our mindset and also the system to become something better. So, but I think, of course, it's like a feedback loop. We have to recursively using this know-how to improve the algorithm for sure. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next section. So right now, I think only engineering is not enough. We need more diverse, inclusive perspective in this system design and building. For example, we didn't include it like a lot of like indigenous culture and language couldn't be recognized, be translated by the machine. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of like missing links and pieces in the whole picture. So I think this part of knowledge and experience could be crucial when we're fighting against the climate change. So I think this is what we have to bear in mind.
Okay, just to give it a bit of context, I understand that you actually worked in technology before becoming a science fiction writer. Would you care to talk more about that?
Actually, it's another way around. So I always a Trekkie, so Star Trek fan. Since kid, I think it was even before 10. So I start to watch Star Wars, like Star Trek, Ghost in the Shell, Jurassic Park, and I became a sci-fi fan. And later on, it drove me to work in the industry and helped me to understand, what people are really thinking about in the lab and how they turn ideas into actual product and making huge impact to the billions of users. So I think this is like a two-way interaction actually helped me to understand more about what's between the reality and the imagination. And I think definitely we need to think about like what kind of future we really want to create. And we have to start to think about like we have to imagine that first. Otherwise, we couldn't create this kind of consensus, because I think consensus is so important. It's like concentrating all our resources from different individuals into a society and to make things happen. So I think this is all about storytelling.
Okay, so you talk about the future. Since this morning, the sessions have mainly centered around geopolitics, the current US-China tensions, a not so optimistic economic outlook, and so on and so forth. Then there's the pandemic, there's climate change, et cetera, et cetera. Seems to be an unusually, an unusual time of doom and gloom. As a science fiction writer, do you see any happier scenarios for the years ahead?
I think, interestingly, in my different books, like my previous book, Waste Time, was written 10 years ago, and the recent book was written in actually during the pandemic. So I can realize that I became more and more positive, and the time become brighter and brighter. And I think not because I became a more optimistic person, but because the reality sucks. And you have to give your readers some kind of hope, even if it's a fake hope. So I think, yeah, this is what we do. And when the world, especially the younger generation, they really suffer from it. They suffer from this sabotage world they were given. And they're thinking about, actually they're very energetic and they're very creative, but they need some tool in hands to make the change. So I think science fiction, or in a more general way, like speculative fiction, is how we can elaborate the narrative to give them this kind of cognitive flexibility to think beyond the current framework, to jump out of the box, the status quo, and to make the speculation what we could do step by step to make things happen, to build up a brighter, optimistic future. So I think what's so encouraging is when I travel all around the world, so all this young readership, they're so engaging, they're so devoting themselves into the stories, and they come up with so many questions all about our reality, all about our society and the future. They care about the world. But the problem is we didn't give them any toolbox in hand. So I think this is something I hope everyone here bear in mind what we could do to incentive the younger generation to help them at least to build up some kind of like optimistic imagination about the future, and maybe some kind of community, some kind of platform they can build up this kind of interaction and submitting their future proposal to make the change. So I think this is so important.
We've got a few questions coming in, and you have a fan, AI 2041, 10 visions for our future. This question is, what is the future of AI? 2041 is a true eye-opener and a joy to read. What are your personal worries around AI's potential harm to humankind?
So my personal worries is actually about like autonomous weapon. So because that's something you can see from now is like the new arm racing, and all the countries might want to do it because this is the killing. This is the real killer. So I think a lot of discussion happening internationally, but the problem is just like nuclear bomb. So if one country actualize it, other country will follow up for sure. So this is something I'm worrying about it all the time, and it seems like inevitable it's gonna happen.
You talk about the younger generation. So there's a question here. What is the future of AI, and how would the younger generation deal with it?
I think over the next 1 or 2 decades, definitely human-machine collaboration will be the mainstream, like among all the different industries, jobs, and education and entertainment for sure. So I think as an individual, especially young people, they have to learn how to work with AI. For example, as a creator myself, I started to collaborate with AI such as GPT-2 and 3, and also with Midjourney from text prompt to generate some imageries. So I think this is the way how I can learn the new way of create. So I think also for everyone, you need to learn because this is something definitely will happen very soon. So you have to open up and you have to embrace the new possibilities and use machine to uplifting yourself. So I think this is the right attitude we should do.
Okay, I think this question about predictions actually is the same question that I was going to ask. What are your predictions for the next big thing for technology beyond AI, the metaverse, quantum computing? How would these different technologies converge? What are the risks and opportunities?
Yeah, there are several things I'm looking into. One is quantum computation for sure, because it's totally a game changer. And another thing is synthetic biology, because this is something might definitely like change all the industry, agriculture, medical care, and also climate change and biodiversity. So this is something I think is so important. And another thing is cognitive science, because we learn so much from human brain to improve the machine, the AI algorithm and the model. So I think AI also help us to understand better how our consciousness, how our understanding and learning process functioning. So I think this is something definitely will happen in the future, like it's like a feedback loop, like helping each other, AI and human intelligence co-evolve in the future.
Interesting. Now, do you believe that some individuals in a society would be less efficient than computers and machines at every level?
I think this is a little bit tricky question, because I think there are a lot of like vulnerable group, not because they are born in that way, but because of all the social construction, limited their capability and potential be actualized. So I think in the future, AI definitely will be something can empower the individual to fully actualize their potential. But also, in some society, maybe AI could be something suppressing this kind of actualization of individual. So I think it all depends on how one system deploy the technology, and it's all decided by the mindset and the philosophy.
What kind of mindset are you talking about here?
I think, yeah, there are some fundamental value, like we should empower everyone to pursue the freedom and fully actualize themselves, and this kind of belonging, security, and dignity, I think is as equal as everyone else in the world. But yeah, I can see it's so equally distributed right now.
Okay. Now, in a tech-powered future, another question here, lots of questions now. In a tech-powered future, would the new dystopia be a non-tech analog world instead? Should we prevent the state of being dependent on technology? And if so, how might we do so? Well, that's like 4 questions in one.
Yeah, I try to understand the question. It's a little bit.
So
yeah.
the new dystopia, would it be a non-tech analog world instead?
I think right now we couldn't imagine a non-tech analog world. So it means like basically we cut off everything like connected in the grid, and means we have to sacrifice a lot of things we already have. So I think maybe in the future technology will be something more invisible, but it's deeply embedded in our body, in the environment, in the cultural construction, but it's not on the surface. So, but that also means it's more dangerous because everything is invisible. So it could be manipulated by the designer, by the system behind the scene. So I think that kind of dystopia is already here.
Okay. Now, I'm told to wrap up because we're running out of time.
Sure.
What is your vision in terms of mitigating global disasters, crises, and even war from a sci-fi perspective?
I think everything happens now all around the world reminds me of one very important concept in Buddhism. It's called distinguishment. It's like something distinguish ourselves with the others, like human with other species, like subjectivity with objectivity, and everything. So I think that create a lot of like separationism and hostile and misunderstanding. So in my imagination, maybe in the future we can come up with some technology that help us to come over all this kind of distinguishment and help us to understand and feel this is the ultimate empathy of the otherness. And I think maybe that could help us to solve most of the question we are having right now. So it's like something bridging the gaps between human, machine, and the nature intelligence. So it creates oneness. It's called Gaia. Back in the day when James Lovelock invented the concept, Gaia hypothesis. So I think this is my version of a brighter future.
Empathy, oneness through technology.
Yes.
Sounds like a happy ending to me. Thank you very much
Thank you
for your time this afternoon, Stanley.